Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our Germinal webinar here this evening with Dr Mary McEvoy from Germinal and Derek O'Donoghue. He's the college principal of Pallaskenry College, and myself, Sandra Hayes, from the Teagasc office in Thurles. This webinar is all about making reseeding work for you. We've two great presentations this evening from Mary and from Derek. We very much welcome as many questions as possible, and we'll make every effort to make sure that we answer those for you. So without any further ado, I'll get Mary to start, and as I say, put all your questions in on the Q&A box, and I'll be keeping an eye on them as we go through tonight's presentations. So Mary, if you want to get started there, it'd be great.
Perfect. Thanks, Sandra, and thanks once again to you for hosting the webinar tonight, and a huge thanks to Derek for joining us as well. So this evening I'm just going to talk about reseeding. We'll go through the benefits of reseeding. We'll focus on the timing of reseeding. Obviously, where we are at the moment, it's going to be very much focused on spring reseeding, but you know, a lot we'll still also be thinking of autumn reseeding, and we'll talk about that to some degree as well. We look at methods of establishment, the differences between them, and maybe what might be the best choice. We'll briefly talk about the recommended list and pasture profit index, and we'll discuss clover briefly as well. Okay, and as Sandra said, happy to take questions throughout the presentation, so keep them coming in on the chat if you want anything clarified. So in terms of the benefits of reseeding, so you know, obviously one of the main benefits is increased dry matter yield. So we see extra grass growing right across the year in the range of 3 tons of dry matter with perennial ryegrass dominated swards compared to old permanent pasture. And I suppose in reality, in some situations, you can get a lot more than this 3 ton, which is given as the standard figure. One of the big benefits is the increased seasonal growth. So with perennial ryegrass dominated swards, through grass breeding, grass breeders are focused on increasing grass growing in the spring and in the autumn. And obviously that's when there's often a deficit of grass availability out on farm. So if we can increase grass growing in the spring and autumn and reduce the demand for concentrate and silage without dramatically increasing grass growing during the main grazing season, when we already have a surplus grass in the system, you know, that's of big benefit to farmers. With perennial ryegrass dominated swards, we do see improved response to fertilizer and nitrogen. So we see in the region of 25% greater response to applied fertilizer and nitrogen compared to old permanent pastures. We see better regrowths with perennial ryegrass dominated swards, and I suppose that's especially going to be obvious as we go into the second round. So often the second round can be very tight in terms of grass availability out on farm. And swards which are dominated by perennial ryegrass and those which are more recently reseeded, you know, farmers tend to see that they recover quicker after the first grazing. They've more grass available there in the second round, and it helps get through that pinch point out on farms. With perennial ryegrass dominated swards, you know, quality is probably one of the biggest benefits there are. So we get much improved quality or dry matter digestibility compared to older permanent pasture. And this higher quality grasses, they're more palatable to animals. We see increased animal performance and increased animal intakes. So we're going to leave more behind in the tank, or better lamb or beef growth rates. Okay, and I suppose ultimately when we talk about reseeding, it always comes down to the bottom line. It has to have a beneficial effect in terms of farm profitability. And I suppose reseeding has been shown to be one of the few technologies we can adapt at farm level, which will pay for itself within 2 years. So you know, there are big benefits from true reseeding at farm level.
Yeah, I don't think I've come across a farmer yet, Mary, that hasn't seen the benefits. I don't think there's any disadvantages to reseeding.
No, look, I mean, I suppose once it's done right, you know,
yeah,
you might have a farmer which mightn't be happy with the end result, but you know, if we get the basics right, farmers will always be happy with the process of reseeding. So in terms of timing of reseeding, so obviously, you know, we're on the 23rd of March here tonight, you know, when a lot of guys are going to start thinking about reseeding, you know, as we move into mid-April. So I would always say, I suppose it's important to take the second grazing off a paddock. You know, don't spray it off too early. Take your second grazing, get through that pinch point, as I said already, in the going into the second round. Let some regrowth come, and then take it out for reseeding. If you reseed it now or in a month's time, you're probably going to nearly be into it at the same time. Because the temperatures just still aren't there at the moment. So with a spring reseed, and I suppose when I talk about spring reseeding, I'm talking about, you know, April, even into early May. You know, soil temperatures are improving, ground conditions are also, or should also hopefully be improving. Hopefully we'll get a decent spring again this year. Day lengths are getting longer, and this is all beneficial in terms of the establishment and germination of the new seeds. There's much improved opportunity for weed control. So through spring reseed, you have a much greater window of opportunity to get out and apply your post-emergent spray. And obviously this is critical to control weeds in a new lay. And you also have the opportunity for multiple grazings. So if we can get 3 or 4 grazings off a reseed in the spring, it'll tiller out and thicken up the sward, and it'll be a much better sward there available come the following spring, compared to maybe an autumn reseed, which you mightn't get out to graze at all until the following spring. And at that stage, you know, a lot of tillers will already have died out. So a lot of benefits with the spring reseed.
Mary, what are you looking for there, if you don't mind me asking, in a guide for anyone there for the ground condition or for ground temperatures? What would you like to see? Or no frost, you know, in the weather? Is there any particular?
Yeah, like you won't be through the worst of the frost anyhow. Like, you know, some light frost won't affect it dramatically, but you wouldn't like to see any severe or heavy frosts. Okay. And look, I mean, I suppose you know, once we get to mid-April, one of the big things I like to see is just getting that second grazing off it. You know, not being in a rush to get a paddock taken out and sprayed off. Get the second grazing, let the regrow come on it, and then spray it off. And I think, you know, that'll mean you'll have more grass available, and you won't be under such pressure, you know, in late April, until grass growth starts to meet herd demand. So
time now for farmers to be earmarking what needs the second grazing and what way to kind of work their rotation around that, just to have it all kind of getting that plan started at this stage.
Absolutely. And most guys will know, you know, what fields they want to reseed this year. They'll have pinpointed those maybe from their pasture base, the farm walks. They'll know which fields aren't performing, you know, which they're getting less silage out of, which fields aren't regrown or aren't given as quick a turnaround in terms of the, you know, the rotation's that bit slower on them. So they will have pretty pinpointed where they want to reseed. So it's about planning and, you know, being prepared in advance, I suppose, rather than, you know, doing it ad hoc.
Thanks, Mary.
One of the risks we have seen over the last probably three years now with spring reseeding is, you know, a dry spell kind of coming in early to mid-May, and it's been more problematic in certain parts of the country and on certain farms than others, but it is something to be aware of, and, you know, nobody wants to get caught there. So, you know, just be aware if you've a dry farm, you know, don't leave it too late before you get it in the spring either. Okay. In terms of autumn reseeding, and look, there's no issue with autumn reseeding. There's a lot of pluses with spring reseeding. With autumn, I suppose the biggest thing is not to put the seed in the ground too late. I would always say the seed should be in the ground by the first week of September. After that, you know, you're kind of taking a lot of risks with the weather. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and you might get away with it and be lucky, or you might get caught badly. And you know, reseeding is probably costing in the region of 700 to 750 euro a hectare this year. So it's too expensive to miss the opportunity and just, you know, not get the seed in time. So this work was done in the early 90s by Culleton, and it just basically shows the difference between a September and October sown, between a September and October reseed. So same number of seeds were sown per metre squared. 6 weeks post sowing, there was more seedlings present on the earlier sown sward. Okay, and most interestingly, the following March, for the September sown sward, there was 7,000 tillers compared to 3,000 on the October sown sward. And over twice the amount of grass availability in the September sown compared to the October sown sward. So it just goes to show timing is crucial. Autumn is fine, but just don't put the seed in too late.
Yeah, and I can speculate, I don't have figures on it, and I don't know whether you have, Mary, but I can speculate that the October one will have that ground taken over with an awful lot more weeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the earlier it goes in the autumn, the better chance you have of getting out with post-emergent spray. And that's absolutely crucial. The earlier you can get out with your post-emergent spray, the better chance you have of successfully hitting those weeds. If you don't get out with that, chickweed will grow at lower temperatures compared to grass and clovers, and chickweed can end up taking over swards if it's left to grow over the winter. So post-emergent spray is crucial regardless of when you're reseeding, you know, but it is very important to get it out for the autumn reseed as well. And also with the autumn reseed, the chances are you mightn't get a grazing off that at all. The ground conditions might be just a little bit too tacky. You mightn't get a grazing. So come the spring, you know, it's not as well tillered a sward as it potentially could be if you had sown it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, seen that. Yeah.
So in terms of soil fertility, and look, this is probably it's probably one of the most important things to get right. And I know Derek is going to talk about this to some degree in his presentation and show the benefits of focusing on that from the Pallaskenry perspective. But, you know, where we have low soil pH, we're seeing a loss of in the region of 1.5 tons of dry matter per hectare. Similar for P index 1 compared to P index 3. And where at K index 1, we're seeing up to 3 tons of dry matter per hectare lost in silage. Look, this is from research. In reality, you're probably seeing bigger losses out on farm. And you know, the first protocol is to correct your soil pH. And I would always say to farmers, if you have a soil fertility issue, focus on that before you spend money on reseeding. Get your soil fertility right. And you know, your existing swards will perform a lot better than they have been, but also it'll put you in a much better place when it does come to reseeding down the line.
That's one message is very consistent with yourselves, Mary. Your colleague Dermot and Dermot both would push that you know, invest in the soil fertility first. You know, I know we would be singing that message as well in Teagasc, and we've seen like great returns. Like if you spend €1 on lime, you get a €7 return. You wouldn't get that returns anywhere else. It's a, you know, it's phenomenal what you can get back from just addressing the pH issue on its own. Yeah. It is, and look, I mean, correcting your soil pH, and I'll show it in the next slide. You know, it does make other nutrients more available. So you might be at your soil results might tell you you're at P index 1. If you correct your soil pH, you might see a jump without putting out any P at all. So it is absolutely crucial, and it's the cheapest fertilizer there is. You know, so it makes sense to start with it. By just correcting your soil pH, it can release up to 80 kilos of nitrogen per hectare from the soil alone, and that's not putting out any bagged fertilizer. The P and K become more available, and you apply any fertilizer you do apply will be used much more efficiently. Okay, so putting out lime is the first place to start, and you will definitely see the return if you have an issue. So just to explain, this is work that was conducted by Shieldwall and Lawler back in 2013, and it looked at a control, which is the no P, no lime scenario there on the left of your screen, compared to where lime was applied, where phosphorus only was applied, or where both phosphorus and lime was applied. And this is 12 months post-application, okay? So the results is 12 months after the application. So 5 ton of lime was applied per hectare in this trial, in the lime only treatment. 100 kilos of P was applied in the P only treatment, and then the combination of both was applied in the P and the P and lime treatment. And you can see a dramatic improvement, and it's just to focus here again on the lime. You're moving from a soil index 1 where there was nothing applied up to soil index 3 where only lime was applied, and that just goes to show the true value of lime and what it can do for your soil. So if you're at a low soil pH, it locks up nutrients in the soil. They're not available to the plant. Putting out 5 ton of lime probably costs about 22, 23 euro per ton spread. You know, €100, and you have jumped from P index 1 to P index 3. So it's hugely valuable to correct your soil pH if you have an issue. Yeah, and we'll get to see this in a kind of in a practical case with Derek's story later on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In terms of the methodology of reseeding, so again, look, I mean, we would often get asked, Sandra, you know, what is the best method? How should I reseed? What's the differences between the method and what's going to work best for my soil type? So look, I mean, I suppose essentially what I'm going to say here, if they're done right and conditions are right, there should be no difference between any method, okay? And work conducted by Creighton in Teagasc Moor Park a number of years ago compared ploughing to disc and one pass to direct drill versus a control which wasn't reseeded. It was an old permanent pasture. He found no difference between methods, but he did see an increase across all cultivation methods compared to the control in the region of 2 tons extra grass grown where something was reseeded in the spring compared to where the reseed didn't happen at all. Okay, so you're still getting a benefit in terms of grass growth by taking out ground in the spring. It was out for over 60 days. Still saw the benefit in terms of extra grass growth, but no difference between methods. And I suppose ultimately, if it's all done right, you know, all these methods will work. There are pluses and negatives to each of the methods. Ploughing gives you the chance to level a field. It's not always an option on stony ground, and obviously, you know, it's getting harder and harder to find willing participants to go out and help you pick stones. So that can limestone engineers, you mean? That's what they're called now. That's exactly limestone engineers. Disc and one pass, obviously, it does, works very well. Creates a good soil, a good seed bed for a good soil seed contact. It's
It's important not to overwork the soil, and not to travel too fast as well with the disc, or you can end up with a very fluffy seedbed. Direct drilling is probably, to be fair, where we see most of the problems, okay? And generally it's as a result of the weather not coming right after the seed goes into the ground. So, most guys are obviously going to spray off and then sow the seed. Lime is absolutely crucial. If you have trash on the surface there from the old sward as it decays, it's going to be worse in this scenario compared to where you have created a tilt of the soil. Lime is absolutely crucial in this scenario to counteract that surface acidity and to help improve the environment around the seed as it tries to germinate. With the direct drill, obviously the seed is sown into slots in the ground essentially with most of these, and there's often enough moisture there in the ground for the seed to germinate. Okay, if the moisture doesn't come down from above, we can see problems with this, because the seed is germinated, it then needs moisture from in terms of rainfall to keep going. If the moisture doesn't come, if you go into a dry spell, you can have a poor take with direct drilling. So just be aware of the forecast and the longer term forecast, and you want to make sure there's plenty of rain in the longer term forecast for this method in particular.
And it can be an issue as well, Mary, with burying the seed too deep as well, can't it?
Yeah, it can. Look, it can. And to be fair, probably, most operators or most guys, using these machines kind of know where the seed needs to go. And, it's worth just keeping an eye just to make sure the seed doesn't go down too deep. Okay, because you don't want that happening. If you just think the size of a grass seed, it's trying to get all its energy from that seed in order to put down a root and put up a shoot. So, if it's down too deep, it'll run out of energy before it sees the light of day. Okay. I'm just going to show a comparison. This was some people on tonight might have attended Brian Hogan's reseeding demo, which is hard to believe, but it was back in August 2019, when we held this. Little did we know it'd be the last one we were going to hold for quite a while.
Yeah.
So this field was reseeded on the 7th of August 2019, and what I'm comparing here is a disc and para harrow compared to the earth seed drill. 3 weeks, and this first picture here is 3 weeks post sowing. So you can see, looking at this picture here, the disc and para harrow seems to have more plants, it seems to be more even take, but if you're looking at it on your phone, you're probably not going to see the difference, but there is a good proportion of plants there in the earth seed drill. It's obvious that they're in lines. There's not too many misses, in fairness. Most of the plants have come up, but they're obviously, the gaps between the drills makes it look a bit sparser than the disc and para harrow on the left. So 7.5 weeks post sowing, what did we see? You can see very good even take with the disc and para harrow. The earth seed drill, again, plenty of grass plants there. They have essentially all come up. You can still see the drills visible, but like plenty of seeds in this ward there, it's going to fill out. And I went up and had a look at that field there just the other day, and very hard to tell the difference in terms of where one stopped and the other started. So, it has been a good take on both of them. And look, it's back down to the basic principle, if the methodology is right, they should all work. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great photograph just to show the difference, Mary. But as I say, if you did the whole field with the earth seed drill, you probably wouldn't notice any difference, just because the other one is right beside it. It's very good for comparison purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I suppose, to mention some of the seed drills, it can be an issue in terms of slugs can get into those tramways. More of a problem with autumn reseeds. It's basically like a railway line for slugs. If they get in, go down along, and they'll nip off a lot of the plants as they move down along. So just to be aware, and I suppose, keep an eye. If you think you have a problem, get out with your slug pellets to control them.
Yeah, if people remember Pac-Man years ago, probably showing my age, but the slug, it kind of gobbles along the drill, so it does.
Exactly. So why do reseeds struggle or fail? So, I'm going to just kind of go through the most common reasons we see and focus on them. So poor seedbed preparation, obviously, this can be a major issue, and poor kill off of the old sward can be a major cause of the problem here as well. So I'll show a couple of pictures in a few minutes which go through these in a little bit more detail. But when we spray off the old sward, we want to make sure we allow the glyphosate adequate time to work. Don't be in a rush to go out and get this, get the ground tilled and get the seed into the ground. If you're disking I would say you'd want to leave it 3 weeks from the time you spray off before you go until, just to allow full breakup of the sod and to have, and to allow it break up right down to the roots, so the roots aren't holding. Often with the disc, if someone goes in and discs too early, you'll have a lot of sods held together by the roots. They haven't fully broken down, and you'll have crows then kind of destroy your seed bed on you then.
Yeah, I think that's where the temptation is. You think after 2 weeks it's worked, but it really pays off to wait that little bit longer, Mary.
It does. And I mean, you know, I've had people say, you know, it's an extra 10 days, but when you think about it, it's an extra 10 days in the lifetime of your sward. It's the difference between maybe not getting it as good a take as you should and getting it done right. You know, I mean, I think, you know, often we panic too much about trying to get turned around and rush to do it in the 60 days or whatever it is. You know, get it done right, and that's the most important. That's where you're going to get the biggest return.
Yeah.
If you have a soil pH issue, you know, that could be another problem, and especially where you have surface trash. You know, obviously we'd always be recommending you remove the surface trash before you go in and till the ground. But you know, and this is where lime is hugely important again, because lime will help with the decay of the old trash. It'll help break it down and counteract any acidity that is released. So liming is crucial, regardless of, even I would say, if people, if your soil test results are telling you have no issue with lime, you don't have a requirement for lime, putting out some Grand Lime at reseeding, you will see the benefit, and it is worth spending a little bit of money on it. Obviously, look, we've talked about soil fertility status before, you know, or, you know, it is important to get, you know, if you're spending the money on reseeding, don't skip the final hurdle. Start to correct your soil fertility if there is an issue. Put a plan in place and work on it over the next couple of years. Don't think just putting out 3 bags of 10-10-20 at reseeding is going to solve all your problems. It has to be a longer term plan if you're at low indices for P and K. Timing is important. You know, sometimes you see guys going out too early or too late. We've spoken about that to some degree already. You know, better off wait till the end. You know, get to second grazing, as I said, and think about spraying off in mid-April or late April, and you'll get a much better take as well. Rolling is one of the big ones, and you know, often this is probably the biggest issue that we see, or the biggest reason we get called out to farms in terms of problems with a reseed. So often you'll see the grass seeds coming lovely along the tram lines where the tractor's driven up and down, and it's not coming outside that. And that's a sure indication that it hasn't been rolled well enough. Okay, I've never seen a field over-rolled. I've seen things that weren't rolled well enough. So, you know, make sure you roll. It's absolutely crucial. It helps consolidate the seed bed. It helps maintain moisture within the seed bed as well, and it helps give you much better soil-seed contact. Okay, so it is crucially important. You know, skipping your post-emergent spray, again, I suppose you go to all the effort reseeding. You know, you spend money on grass seeds, you spend money on the glyphosate, you spend money on the contractor to come in to do the job, and you don't follow up with your post-emergent spray. It's absolutely crucial. It's the best chance you will have for weed control in the lifetime of that sward. I suppose if you think of a dock plant growing from a seedling compared to an established dock, much easier to kill the seedling dock, you know, when it's the size of a €2 coin than a big dock plant, which is maybe a root that's over, you know, nearly a metre deep. And
like the likes of chickweed as well, like it'd be at the very early emergence stage, rather than when it gets into a very thick mat, it can smother a huge amount of ground very, very quickly.
It can, yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, you know, I've mentioned that already, but, you know, early grazing at low covers is absolutely crucial. So once the plant withstands the pull test, so, you know, obviously after post-emergent spray, leave it the time as per label before you can put animals in. Often it's a week. It might be a little bit longer depending on the spray you use. But once the sward is withstanding with the pull test, so if you go out, break off the plant with your hand to mimic, you know, an animal grazing, if the roots aren't coming up out of the ground, it's ready for a grazing. So go in often and go in at low covers. It will tiller out and thicken up the sward, and it'll result in a much better and better tillered sward going forward.
Okay. I just see just a couple of our attendees, they might be putting in raising hands. If they just put any questions or queries that they have into the Q&A function, I'll get them answered for you. Just a question that I see coming in there, Mary, on your last point there, first grazing at too high a cover, right? If somebody had put in a particular mix that's for silage, right, would you still encourage a grazing beforehand?
Look, In an ideal world, yes, if you can graze it at all, do. Often, obviously, on silage, in terms of silage ground, it's often an out farm. There mightn't be stock out there, so it mightn't be possible. But we would always say if you can graze it, for the first, grazing or two, it'll create a much better sward long term.
Okay.
If you can't, you can't. And if it's, for a lot of farmers now, they probably that's becoming a bit more difficult to do, especially without blocks. But
okay.
If you can graze it at all, I would recommend you do it. And sheep are great.
Yeah.
Fantastic job.
Just get your hands on a flock for a day or two.
And try to keep them in.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Is there any other questions there, Sandra? Or?
There's two in there at the moment, right? And they're in relation to clover. So I might wait until we cover the presentation. We'll come back to those two, okay? Because I know there's nothing straight in on clover just yet. Okay,
yeah, we'll talk about clover in a minute, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So just a couple of pictures to show some reseeding problems. So you can see here, this is a field that was drilled. You might be able to see the grass coming up there. Again, if you're watching it on a mobile device, it might be a bit more difficult. But it's hit and miss essentially compared to the picture I showed you a few moments ago of Brian Hogan's. Okay, so a lot of skips in this grass seed is really struggling to come up. There's a lot of trash there that probably could have been cut or grazed a little bit tighter, and lime didn't go out this. The lime is absolutely crucial to counteract surface acidity, and it'll help break down that sward. So putting out lime will break down the old sward a lot quicker than not putting out any lime. So it is very, very important in a direct drill scenario to always use lime, regardless of what your soil pH status is. This is again, this field was disked and power harrowed. You can see an awful lot of sods visible here. And again, I suppose it's just working the ground too soon after the glyphosate went out. As I said already, leave it closer to the 3 weeks and you wouldn't have that problem. You'll have a much cleaner seed bed, okay? If you have a lot of crows pulling, it can be an indicator that you might have a leather jacket problem in the field as well. Not overly common with the spring reseeds, more of an issue in the autumn, and not generally a huge issue. We tend to not see too many incidences of it, but if you have an awful lot of crows coming, they're coming. There's something there for them to feed on. So yeah, just to be aware of that. And if you,
as they say, this picture is not a good look, not one to be attained.
No, and look, I mean, I've seen worse, and in fairness, it did turn out okay in the end, but you want to try avoid it if you can at all.
Yeah, true.
And finally, then I suppose this picture here, it's the same farm, same sown date, same grass mix. The only difference is, as some of you probably guess as you're watching, the field on the right got rolled. Weather broke that evening. They didn't get out the road at the field on the left, and you can see a stark difference in terms of the establishment of the grass between the two of them. And the pictures taken on the same date. Okay, so again, absolutely crucial. It shows the importance of rolling. Get out, get it done. If you can't get it done, the night it goes in, hopefully you'll get a few dry days a couple of days later and get out and roll it. It's absolutely crucial.
So in the quote, to roll or not to roll, there's no such question. It is to roll.
Just moving on to the grass recommended list. Look, the Department of Agriculture are responsible for evaluating grass varieties for us here in Ireland. And they have a fairly rigorous testing regime for grass varieties. So every variety, in order to make it onto the recommended list, must go through at least 2 sowing years and have 2 harvest years per sowing year. So you have at least 4 years data on any variety that gets onto the recommended list. It's identifying the better varieties for the Irish climate, for Irish farm systems. And essentially, if it's not on the recommended list, we would be saying you shouldn't be using the grass variety. In recent years, we have the Teagasc Pasture Profit Index as well, and this is applied to the data coming from the department's recommended list trials. So seasonal yield, broken down into spring, summer and autumn dry matter yield, quality, silage yield and persistency are all shown within the Pasture Profit Index. And basically, it's like an economic ranking index for grass varieties. So it highlights the strengths and weaknesses of individual varieties across those key traits. And you can clearly see where varieties perform well, where varieties a bit weaker, and evaluate your mix on the basis of that. If a variety isn't on the recommended list, we would say you shouldn't be using it.
It's what I use. If a farmer comes to me with a seed docket and asks me, is this a good mix? I will go to the PPI and evaluate them for him and say, pluses and the minuses, if there is any minuses.
Look, I mean, it's fair to say as well, you know, any of the merchants and co-ops out there, when they're formulating grass seed mixtures with ourselves, we're picking off it, we're looking at it, and we're putting mixtures together based on the performance within it. So it is important. Right. There is a new trait this year, the utilisation trait, which is put in as a star rating. So it's within the pasture profit index, but it's not an economic value. It's a star rating. It's a provisional trait, and I suppose, you know, you know, obviously if we can identify those varieties which are performing better in terms of utilisation from a farmer's perspective, it is hugely important. We want to know what varieties can be grazed out by animals and what can't. Look, I suppose we have at the moment the utilisation trait. I suppose when you look at the quality sub-indices versus utilisation, some of the higher quality varieties seem to be doing poor on utilisation, which is unusual, and we're surprised at. A little bit more data, a couple of more years trial, I think we'll have a very good trait there, and that'll be obviously useful for everyone going forward.
Great.
Okay. In terms of white clover, obviously, look, there's been a huge amount of emphasis on increasing clover content in swords in recent years. Clover can fix up to 150 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, and we see huge benefits in terms of animal performance. So we see increased milk solids per cow, and some of the work has shown 31 kilos. We've seen it increase up to 58 kilos in some of the work down in Clonakilty in terms of milk solids per cow per year. So huge benefits there in animal performance. And, you know, we're also seeing an improvement in sward production. So some trials have shown 1 tonne, others have shown 2 tonne, others have shown no loss in production where you're comparing 250 kilos of nitrogen with grass only compared to grass clover swords at 150 kilos of nitrogen. So huge benefits to having clover in the mixture. We need to be using more of it, and we need to be putting it in there. Farmers in derogation, since January 2020, they have been required to sow white clover if they are reseeding. So 0.6 of a kilo of naked clover or 1 kilo of pelleted clover is the requirement there. Okay. Some of the risks with white clover, low spring growth is an issue. It is slower to grow compared to grass in the spring. It likes temperatures of 8 degrees before it really kicks off. But tactical application of nitrogen will alleviate that problem. It'll encourage your grass to grow, and then you can pull back on your nitrogen when you get to the mid-season period and let the clover do its work for you.
I think we've a good few questions down in the next point that you're going to raise there, Mary, in regards to weed control.
Yeah, so look, weed control is an issue, especially now for white clover. The clover safe herbicides have been taken off the market. So essentially, you can't buy any clover safe herbicide at the moment. If you have them already, you can use them up until October of this year. Okay, so, and that's the deadline. I know there is an application in with the department to get an allowance on the clover safe herbicides. We haven't got word on that as of yet. And if they do give permission, it'll probably only extend it by 120 days. So it still isn't going to solve the problem longer term. Okay.
No.
So it is an issue. So what we're probably going to see more of is people sowing their grass seed, go out with their weed control, and oversow their clover seed then afterwards.
Okay. And what method would you? Because I know one of the questions is what method for that incorporation would you recommend, Mary?
So look, I mean, we would go out and have farmers who would go out and oversow clover in established swords with a fertilizer spinner. You can do the same and it'll be even easier in a new reseed because you'll have a lot more soil visibility. Okay, the biggest things I suppose are to make sure that the new reseed, it's going to be grown aggressively, and keep it grazed. Don't let it get too strong, because it'll shade out the clover seedlings as they're starting to get established. So and I'd say, maybe pull back on your nitrogen as well in your new reseed, just to let the clover. And
soil fertility, you need the P, the K, and the pH all correct for clover establishment. So your soil fertility is critical.
Yeah, no, definitely. pH, P's and K's, it's probably even fussier than grass. You need to have them right for clover. And I suppose pelleted clover would be useful in this regard for overseeding. It just a lime, a fertilizer coating on the clover. It helps when you're throwing it with a fertilizer spinner. It helps throw that a little bit further. And we'd be saying when you're oversown clover, go out with a bit of 10-20 or something like that when you're oversown clover, and it'll just help you know where it's being spread.
Yeah, just in both of those cases, the naked and the pelleted, the seed is very, very small and nearly like dust.
Yeah.
If you're mixing it with a fertilizer spreader, do the mixing, let's say at the gate, don't mix it in the yard and drive down the field, you know, a couple of 100 yards away, and then spread it, because all the seed will pull to the bottom of the spinner. So mix just before you spread. It would be my top tip.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I'd so mix in the field and sow in 2 directions as well. So go up and down the field and then go across the diagonal, and it'll just help with get a more even spread. And especially if you're using naked clover, isn't going to throw any great distance. And if you have a windy day, it's going to blow all in one direction. So just be very careful with that. Clover is a much smaller seed compared to grass seed.
Or you could spread it for your neighbour if it was that windy.
So bloat risk is, you know, a lot of guys are concerned about the risk of bloat with clover. It's really only a problem where you have an awful lot of clover in the sward. More of a problem maybe in autumn, you know, as you get to late August, September. You know, there are technologies and advice out there in terms of reducing that risk by putting, you know, giving animals a 3-hour allocation, using bloat island water, things like that. So, you know, it can be managed.
Perfect.
And I suppose the other thing, in 2-cut silage systems, we often see clover taking over the sward and dominating the sward. So, you know, just to be aware of that.
Perfect.
Now, this is just my final slide, just to speak about, I suppose, you know, to summarise what I've said. Regardless of your method, you want a good kill of the old sward. Minimise the surface trash, so remove as much of that as you possibly can, and make sure you put out lime to counteract that surface acidity. Find firm seed bed is absolutely crucial. Roll well, apply your post-emergent spray, and those early grazings at low covers are crucial to aid the tillering of the new reseed.
Lovely, thank you very much. A great presentation, Mary. We have a good few questions that are after coming in. Hold on, Derek, we will get to you. I'm going to do a quick fire questions with Mary so that we'll get through some of those that have come in. Harold just put in, any views on direct drilling followed by glyphosate a few days later? I know you mentioned this to me, Mary, yourself.
Yeah, so look, I mean, you know, some farmers are doing it. Just make sure you know, the timing is going to be crucial there as well, okay? So make sure you don't leave it too long. If you have good conditions, the new seed can germinate quite quickly, and the last thing you want to be doing is hitting that with glyphosate. Okay. And liming is going to be still important there. Okay.
Earliest date for spray off is spring reseeding bare pasture in the southeast of the country. Mary.
The earliest date?
The earliest spray off date, yeah.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, so I mean, it depends. The weather is going to be the biggest influence there. So look, I mean, you can probably spray off by the 10th of April. At that, if you're ploughing, you're not going to be in there till, you know, the 20th of April. And I mean, at that stage, you should have no issues with getting grass seed established.
If you could really answer that question, you make a lot of money, Mary.
Good.
Question there from Frank, ring roller or flat roller?
Always a flat roller.
Always flat. Okay, and we did chat about any chat on clover friendly post-emergent spray for this year. No, I'm afraid, at the moment. And a question from Dennis, how long after spraying should I spread the lime?
How long after you spray with the glyphosate, obviously, should you spread the lime? So look, I mean, I suppose it depends on what method, how you're reseeding, okay? Because if you're going ploughing, obviously you're going to wait till after your plough. You don't want to be just turning down the lime. I'm going to assume by the question maybe you're going to disc or direct drill. So you can spread it basically at any time. Essentially, just make sure you leave enough time for the spray to work. So I'd leave it maybe, you know, a week or so, and then you can go out with your lime.
Okay, a couple of quick ones. I think we kind of covered this one from John. The best way to get clover into existing good sward. So make sure that they're, you know, grazed down beforehand. You know, there's a good soil contact and soil fertility, and mix the seed in with your 10-10-20 and your fertilizer spreader.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I suppose if you're oversowing into established swards, you need to make sure you have soil visibility. Okay, you don't want to be oversowing in a scenario where you detach your grass, because the clover land on the grass, you get a bit of moisture, it'll germinate. If it's not on the ground, it's not going to get to strike. So make sure you can see soil, otherwise don't bother oversow clover.
Okay, question from Tommy here: is it better to go with mixture or monoculture? So look, a mixture, I suppose, is what I would say. There's no single variety out there with all the key traits you're after. You know, obviously with the pasture profit index, it does identify the strengths and weaknesses of individual varieties. You know, depending, and I didn't talk about it, depending on the type of ground, you know, or what you're reseeding for. If it's grazing, you're probably going to talk about 50 to 55% tetraploid, and then 45 to 50% diploid, and having a balance of diploids and tetraploids will probably give you the best sward
in the long term. So
Okay.
and
Yeah,
pick varieties for, you know, if you're reseeding grazing ground, focus on quality, focus on seasonal growth. If it's silage ground, obviously pay more attention to silage indices.
Okay. Now we've that same question in from Padraig as well. Just what we'll do is still a good few more on kind of the lime. So what we'll do is I'll hold those at the moment. Hopefully those people will be still watching our webinar after Derek. So if you can stop sharing there, Mary, and we'll get Derek up and running. You're muted just at the moment, Derek. And we'll come to the rest of the questions after Derek's presentation, plus all of the questions for Derek's.
Okay, thanks, Sandra.
Brilliant. Thanks, Derek. You're up and running.
Okay, welcome everybody, and look, thanks to Germinal for asking us to share our story. And for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I just want to take you through our grass story here in Pallaskenry and where we have come from. And I think it'll very much resonate with what Mary has already gone through. I suppose maybe just a small bit of background in terms of where we are. So we're we're one of the 6 agricultural colleges. We're a privately owned college, owned by the Salesian Order, but we do deliver and we do run Teagasc courses. So we're based in West Limerick by the banks of the River Shannon, and we're approximately 12 miles from Limerick City. So in terms of the farm, in terms of our enterprises, so we're farming just under 500 acres, and the majority of that is owned. The greater part of that is devoted to our dairy enterprise, and we have a much smaller portion to devoted to our livestock, which is beef and sheep. And just from a student point of view, there's nearly 800 students, and like even, I suppose all things are changing, and certainly in education, there's a big switch more to distance education. That's just a brief background in relation to the college and where we are. But I suppose coming back to the main enterprises that we're running and those that we have to grow grass for and grow enough grass for. So currently this year, we're milking 440 dairy cows, all spring calving, compact spring calving. Running a largely grass-based system, feeding somewhere between 500 and 700 kilos of concentrates. On the dry stock side, then we're running a mixed grazing system. We're running 90 spring lambing ewes, so they're just lambing at the minute. We're 3/4 of the way through, and we're running an 80 calf to beef unit as well. So they're the mouths that we have to grow enough grass for, be it in the spring, the main grazing season, the autumn, and silage. And I suppose that's where our focus is to grow enough grass consistently to feed those animals that we have. So we're relatively new to the whole grass measuring, the whole grass management, and this was our grass yield in 2015 from pasture base. So it was blank. We didn't have any measurements. We didn't have any measurements. We weren't grass measuring. We didn't have a quadrant. We didn't have a plate meter, and consequently, we had a blank report at the end of the year, as you see there. What we did know is that we were running, particularly in the autumn time, into shortage of grass. So come mid to late September, we were finding it difficult to get the extended grazing that was being very much advocated, whether it was dairy or our beef system. So we realized that, look, we had to do something, and our starting point was to go and soil sample the entire farm in 2015. And from that, we identified that we had low pH, so we had a big requirement for lime. We had a lot of fields that were low in P and K, and we just put a plan in place to correct that over time. We resampled in January 2018, so it's our plan to soil sample the entire farm every 3 years. So we had our 3rd set of soil sampling there just before Christmas, and we got those results back in January. So this year, that sampling was done by FarmEye in Galway, so it was GPS sampling, so it probably gives us a little bit more accuracy in terms of where we resample in 3 years' time. And then we have our fertilizer plan from Teagasc. We are adding carbon as a separate test this year, and I'll maybe touch on that a bit later.
Right.
But really, our starting point was soil sampling. So what did we get, or what was our farm looking like back in 2015? So soil samples were done through Teagasc. So instead of just getting a bundle of soil sample results back, we got our fertilizer plan. And I think our fertilizer plan was really our roadmap of where to go and our starting point. It didn't look good. And when we look at the soil pH and just looking at what's there in the red circle, when you add up those percentages in red, we were up to 65%. So 7 out of 10 fields, 70% of our farm was wrong for lime. It was deficient. So a bit like what Mary said, it was going to be difficult to grow grass, maintain grass, or get good efficiency or use of our fertilizers. It didn't stop at the lime. When we looked at the P, we had 40% were at index 1 or 2. So they were either very low or low in fertility for P or phosphorus. And potash was a little bit worse, 46%. So what's worrying is down at the bottom, what's in the star there. The percentage of our farm that tested was optimal for combined P, K and lime was just under 19%. So less than 1 field in 5 was at optimal fertility. So like you don't need me or anyone else to tell you that that wasn't putting us in a good position to grow grass.
No, it wasn't, Derek. But the main thing is that you did something about it. You, as you said, your first step, you soil sampled, and the second one, you used those soil samples to give you a result. Now, as I say, the result is poor, but at least you knew where you were.
Yeah, and I think, and I just probably missed it in the previous slide. Like when you look at there, just the total lime requirement, I should have mentioned that over 800 tons, and that was our starting point. We started with lime. We didn't start trying to correct the P and the K. Well, we did indirectly, and we just started targeting our slurry, particularly to those fields. But in terms of money spent, we started with lime. We didn't have the finances to go out and get 800 tons straight off, and that was done over a 3-year period. And we initially started with the fields, not necessarily that were worse or in greater need of lime, but the fields that we were going to reseed, followed by the fields that had the biggest need for lime. So that was back in 2015. So there has been an improvement all along. So our most recent sampling was just before Christmas. So we just got the fertilizer plan for that back there in January. And as well, we have seen a big change. The format of the way it's presented and the colors have slightly changed. You're probably more familiar with that, Sandra.
Yeah.
But
looks good, Derek.
So really the greens, green is good or green is go.
Yeah.
But if we take the lime alone, just like, and that's the one we started with, we have 9% of our fields now that are wrong for lime, or 1 in 10, where we had 7 in 10 wrong. So that's really, and I suppose it's good from our point of view to see that both the soil sampling, the effort in putting out the lime has corrected soil fertility.
Definitely.
We've also improved the phosphorus, and we haven't made as big an inroads on the potash, and maybe taking off small cuts of silage or bales probably isn't helping that, but we are putting a greater emphasis on that. But overall, we have had a big improvement in soil fertility. So the plan, working with our soil results, working with our fertilizer plan from Teagasc, has delivered in terms of improved soil fertility. I suppose the big question then, is that obviously going to deliver more grass for us? Because that's really where we're trying to get. And if we just look at a table summarizing our tonnage, so we didn't have any walk in, or we didn't have any grass measuring in 15, neither did we have in 16. We were concentrating more on correcting soil fertility, and more so than anything else in reseeding program. But based on the number of stock we had and the amount of concentrate feed we bought in, we would have estimated in 2016 that we grew probably 8.5 tons of grass dry matter per hectare.
Just a little bit over the national average.
Yeah, and certainly not where we wanted to be. But from there on, we've been adding almost nearly 2 tons per hectare, and we're probably where we want to be now at this stage. So so last year, 2020, we grew 15.3 tons. So that's right across the farm. That's grazing ground, silage ground, everything that the cows can go to. Fields were taken out for reseeding and could have been out for a large period of time. So every hectare on the farm is included in that, and that's what we're work off. We won't fields that were out for any portion of time for reseeding or for bit of reclamation are put into that. I suppose the other big thing that has changed is our number of walks. We started off with 0 in 2016, and last year we had 59 grass walks, and that's giving us an awful lot more information, which is helping us make better management decisions in relation to grass as well. So it's probably a combined effect. It's just not all soil fertility. And I suppose in on top of that, I have to mention that we started off with a fairly vigorous reseeding program. In 2016, we had been growing approximately 50 odd acres of forage maize. So that came straight back into grasses and reseeded. That gave us an initial boost, and we try and do close to 10% of the farm each year. Now, initially when we started off reseeding, we didn't reseed the lowest in 17 and 18. They weren't always the lowest yielding fields. We had some fields that were yielding well, but the quality of the grass was not good in that they were probably mid-season varieties, very difficult to keep leaf in the early part of the summer. So we took out some of those. So we didn't necessarily concentrate on the lowest yielding fields. It was a combination of yield and quality. So all in all, we'd say yes, through improving soil fertility and a reseeding program and a grass management program, it is delivering for us.
So that.
And I suppose what now our challenge now is to maintain that, and to maintain that with lower input. So look, this was the lime. We started off with lime, and as I said, we've done it over a phased base over initially 3 years. Now we're still putting out lime, and we will not, any fields we're reseeding, and we always put lime out as well. We started, look, the reseeding program obviously was a big part of it as well. And I suppose, what are we doing now to try and maintain and grow that? So in terms of fertilizer, we're on fully 100% protected urea, have been for the last 2 years. That's right throughout the year. And we try and address decay in the autumn with straight potash, and P goes out in the spring in the form of an NP compound plus or minus sulfur. So we keep it simple. All our fertilizer is spread by contractor, so it has to be an overall a simple fertilizer plan. Slurry, and I said initially we as far as we can redirect the slurry to those fields that are low in P and particularly in K. So all our slurry is going out with umbilical and dribble bar, and hopefully we're capturing more of the nitrogen than traditionally we would have put it out by splash plate, and we would have put it out ourselves. We had 2 tankers. We're now down to 1 tanker. Slurry tanker, and that's just used for training purposes, more so for students. But in relation to they putting out slurry with the conventional tanker, they also get to use the tanker with a dribble bar.
Just a question on that, Derek. Back on the slurry one. How do you know the fields that need the slurry? How do you identify them?
Yeah,
because
so
it's not easy for everyone to read the plan.
Yeah, so I suppose what we have in there is all the farm is color coded. The maps that come from Teagasc are color coded. The contractor gets a copy of that, and look, we're learning as we go on. We try and stick, particularly I have been out with the same contractor for slurry spreading for a number of years. He happens to be the same contractor that cuts the silage, but he knows the fields well. He has the map, and he knows where to put the slurry.
Right.
So it needs to be simple.
Yeah.
And I suppose also then this year he has a flow rate meter as well. So not alone that, we know the quantity. We may not know the quality of the slurry. I suppose that's our next step, to do a bit more regular testing of slurry now that we can actually quantify what is going out.
Yeah, good clients that did that, and they're surprised with the results. So it's definitely a thing to do, Derek.
So yeah, we're trying to improve on it all the time. That's as much as we can do. I suppose we do rely and we use pasture base very heavily. We use it for management decisions in relation to grass throughout the year, but the end of year farm summary report gives us very valuable information, both in terms of where we are now and where we have come from. That's just a screenshot of the 2020 end of year farm summary report. But if we look at kind of 2017, the first year that we that we measured grass properly, and I had 22 odd measurements, which was still at the lower end, but it's better than nothing. And in 2017, we grew 10.8 tons. Last year, we grew 15.3, even though we had two little sort of mini droughts last year. But where is this extra grass coming from? We're growing 0.4 of a ton more in the spring in 2020 versus 2017. Obviously, a good chunk more in the summer, which you'd expect with the growth. But the real benefit for us, and this is where we were really falling down in 16 and 17, we're now growing nearly 2 tons per hectare more in the autumn than we were previously. So that is allowing us to have grass in the diet of whether it is the cows or whether it's the beef cattle, as long as ground conditions allow us to stay out, and is also allowing the fields we do close off from early October to have a reasonable cover that we can get out in the spring. So that bit in the autumn is really delivering for us as well. And I suppose the big chunk in the middle, look, that extra 2 tons back in 2018, we had to go and buy in because we came into the start of 2018 with silage pits empty. And we got a drought in 2018 and we had lower first cut silage yields. We at that had to, in the summer of 2018, buy in whole crop, 35, 40 acres of whole crop, and that's expensive. We don't ever again want to be back in that position, and we're definitely out of it now.
Great.
With the grass that we're
surplus silage pit.
Yeah, and look, we have at the minute we have a pit and a quarter left, so not that anybody is looking for a drought, but we have ourselves set up that we can, if we have to, feed right for a reasonable period each summer, and that's been produced on our own farm, not being bought in.
Reduces pressure on man and beast when you have that.
It's peace of mind. Yes, we know it costs money to put it there, but it costs a hell of a lot more money to put it there if you don't have it yourself and you have to buy it, or buy it in former concentrates or otherwise. So look, we do like trying things different. We had these little fellas 2 years ago. We had 2 water buffalo from Johnny Lynch and Macroom, and we had 2 Scottish Highland also that came up from West Cork from a different farmer. They were steers. Not hugely successful. We won't be doing it again, but we did try it. And I saw one of the questions up there earlier on multi-species. We have tried plantain 3 years ago. We went in and we took a 10-acre field, and half it got standard Abergain average height and the other got Abergain average height and plantain all into one field. So the cows, would the cows have any preference, but maybe our management wasn't right, but the plantain is all but gone at this stage, and that was just a straight grazing field. That's not to say we won't maybe try it again, but look, we are prepared to try things that are maybe a bit different and see how they go, and I think that's important for anybody. What we are maybe doing different this year, look, we are soil sampling the entire farm for basically carbon, to try and establish, well, it's a bit like where we were maybe in 2015 with our basic soil sampling for pH and P and K, trying to establish what level of carbon, because we hear so much about carbon and carbon storage and carbon capture, what level of carbon is in our soil. So we have a small selection of fields done from last year, but the rest are just being done this spring. That was just one particular field. It actually was the field that the plantain was in coincidentally. There was 4% carbon. But ultimately, it's given us this figure now. How reliable it is, we're not sure, but it's certainly better than not having anything. As to how much, because what we're trying to see is how much variation there is among the fields, but how much can individual fields, how much nitrogen can they release from the organic nitrogen source that's within the soil, and can we move chemical fertilizer off that field and maybe put it to a field that is lower carbon? But look, it is in the early stages, so that's something different that we are doing this year, and it's just trying to be more sustainable in the long run and establish a base of where we are.
Well, in the light of the 6 o'clock news and the new climate change bill, Derek, you could be well ahead of the posse on this.
Yeah, look, and that's where we look, and that's what we are trying to do in most cases. Look, we need to look. We are a teaching college, so look, we need to be ahead rather than behind. It won't always happen, but we need to be prepared to try new things. And look, that's what we're trying to do here. So in terms, look, I suppose, is this delivering results? Is one thing growing more grass, but we have plenty of silage. We're not running into we're not finishing out the winter with empty silage pits. We have had 2 years now where we have had droughts, and we have had plenty of silage to be able to feed and still grow enough silage for the coming winter. So there's great confidence and security in that. In relation to animal performance, and probably last year was our best year, particularly in lamb performance and lamb thrive, and our general dosing program wouldn't be any different to any other year, but all lambs were gone for slaughter by late September, whereas
Great.
in previous years we would have had lambs going on closer to Christmas. So equally in relation to the beef end, obviously, look, we're able to match livestock performance at grass comparable on the beef as the sheep, but over last winter, the beef animals, and they're only all yearlings going in, would have averaged 0.74 of a kilo over the winter from housing to turnout on 1.5 kilos of concentrates. So the quality of the silage we're making is probably that bit better as well. So it is coming together, and it's lots of small things really that are making that work for us. On the cows, look, it's delivering. This is just this year's protein. We're ahead of last year. We're able to, and look, this is just this month. We took a dip when we went in there in the wet weather in the 15th of March. But right across, when we look at dairy, beef or sheep, we feel it is delivering for us. We're growing more grass, and what we're growing appears to have a better quality in terms of animal performance, and ultimately that's what we're after. And if we can achieve that then with lower inputs and over time use less chemical fertilizer, then we're hopefully farming in a more sustainable manner overall. What do we see as our challenges this year? We're only still on the road in terms of building soil fertility. We're not where we want to be yet. We're trying to grow the same grass as last year with less chemical nitrogen, and we've set ourselves a target. Whether we'll achieve it or not is to use 10% less chemical nitrogen this year than last year. So we're aiming for 200 units of nitrogen as our chemical nitrogen. We were probably closer to 220 last year. And I think you mentioned it maybe there, and you mentioned, Sandra, clover.
Yes.
We are in derogation, so we have to put in. But even if we weren't, we still would be. We would want to tackle the clover. We see that as kind of our multi-species more so than plantain, and if we can put the same effort into over the next 5 years of incorporating clover, and we will probably target no more than somewhere to 7 to 10% per year, that we can manage and graze it intensively after over sowing. We have put clover in consistently every year in the grass seed mixtures. Very little of it there now, but then maybe our management wasn't set up to maintain and keep it either way. But they're the three main areas that we intend to focus on in 2021. So that's it, and thanks for listening, and hope, look, that's our journey. Not saying it's right, but that's where we have come from.
Great, thank you very much, Derek. Great to listen to, a great story. As I say, story so far, to be continued. And you know, great to see that something so simple as a soil result, a soil test result, putting a plan into action, and working from there, and what it has achieved on the farm from 2015. Now, I notice that we still have a great cohort of people still listening on the webinar, so thank you very much for sticking to us. I know we're running a little bit over time, but we've had both our presentations, so I noticed there's just a few more questions. So if Derek and Mary don't mind, we'll answer them in the next couple of minutes and finish up. So I'm just going to go to one there. Back to the the clover as well. Mary, any thoughts on applying watery slurry post-rolling on oversown clover?
Assuming this is probably into an established sward.
Yeah.
No, slurry, it'll help. Look, it all helps. It'll help wash it down to make sure you're getting soil seed contact as well. So I would like it to be watery slurry as well. You don't want to have it too thick, but yeah, watery slurry.
Yeah, too thick can smother the emerging seedling as well.
A bit of caking on the surface, but watery slurry will be of benefit, absolutely.
Perfect. Back a question from Aidan. Best method of cleaning off grass after spraying off, i.e., have you seen cut or graze? Have you seen any preference in your mind, Mary, or is both equally as good?
Yeah, look, no preference. Essentially, you know, once you remove as much as you possibly can, they should both be equally as good. One of the co-ops there this year have come out and recommended that you don't graze off, sprayed off sward with lactating dairy cows. I assume the others will probably follow suit. So just bear in mind the type of stock you're putting on it. I suppose there's a public perception out there. You want to be,
yes.
You don't want to compromise things. But no, look, no preference. Whatever way you can manage to get it off, get it off.
Okay. Question from Martin. What is the correct stage at reseeding to put out lime? So I suppose this will depend on like if you're I suppose ploughing and tilling up, you can incorporate it at that stage. If you're direct drilling.
Yeah, look. I mean, it depends, as you say. But yeah, if you can work it into the seed bed, if you're going out with a power harrow, ideally. If you're direct drilling, just before the seed goes in, essentially.
Perfect. Question then on the lime. Then granulated lime as effective as ground limestone. So
granulated lime, I suppose it's probably actually more effective insofar as granular lime will work a lot quicker than ground lime. Ground lime will work a third of it work in the first 3 months, some more work over a year, and some more will take actually a lot longer to break down. So granular lime is actually more effective. It is a lot more expensive. If you have a big requirement for lime, I would recommend to go with ground lime. If you don't have much of a requirement and you're only using it for reseeding, then granular lime it will work quicker. So you're probably, look, for granular lime, you're probably talking about 2 bags to the acre.
Okay. And Derek, in your case on Pallaskenry, did you use any granulator, or was all the ground limestone that you had?
Everything was ground limestone, purely based on cost and
over 800
long-term
tons.
efficiency and value.
They both play a role as well. Like granulated lime is great. Like if you had rented ground that you mightn't be guaranteed of getting it next year, but if you have a larger quantity, I would always advise farmers myself to go for the ground limestone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Question from Hazel. Can this webinar be watched back? Yes, it can, Hazel. It'll be up shortly, probably in a couple of days on the Germinal website. Is that correct, Mary?
Yeah, hopefully we'll have it up tomorrow. And I think anyone that's watched tonight will get a link to it as well, but it'll be up tomorrow.
Perfect. Question then, another one on the lime spreading. Should you spread the lime before disking if doing a disc only reseed to help eliminate the trash? The lime now, it's not going to eliminate the trash as such.
So the lime will help break down the trash. So look, I mean, yeah, look, either before your power harrow, you can put it out before you disc either. But yeah, just get it out. But you don't, like, obviously with ploughing it's slightly different. You don't want to put it out before you plough.
Okay, and question for Derek there. Derek, what grass seed mixes did you prioritize for reseeds?
Yeah, so I suppose really we would have consistently looked at pasture profit index. We started off initially with Kerry number 3, which would have probably have a bit of Abergain, Aberchoice, and I'm not sure what else was in it at the time. But recently, probably at this stage, 70% of the farm is just Abergain, Aberchoice, 50-50.
Okay, perfect. A question to both of you from Michael. Derek, if you go first. Where do you see multi-species swards fitting in on intensive dairy farms from what you've seen so far?
Okay, from our limited experience of 1.4 acres and a half a field, sown 3 years ago, the plantain is gone.
Okay.
We didn't spray that. We couldn't spray that half the field for weeds post-emergence, or we would have wiped out the
Killed
plantain.
Plantain, yeah.
If you looked at it now from the road, you would think there was plantain in it, but it's not, it's stalks.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's our experience. And I suppose it all depends on what a mixed species sward is. For us, we're just going to concentrate on grass clover.
Okay.
Now, maybe
Okay.
our management of plantain may not have been what was required for us. So I wouldn't judge it totally on that. Now,
Yeah,
that's not to say we won't
yeah.
try it again.
Yeah, look, Mary will know I've joined clients with Germinal and ourselves that have tried it. It's in the early stages. So as I say, the jury's out. We're watching and waiting. I know I've done milk samples and grass samples on some of the fields to see if there's any difference nutritionally, and there isn't. But the inputs are going to be less from a fertilizer point of view because it's fixing its own nitrogen. So as I say, for me, I'm watching and waiting and taking in all the data and the management process for the farmer as well on multi-species.
All we could see was an 8-acre field, and the cows grazed it as one field. They showed no preference. Now, the first 2 years, there was a very good stand of plantain in it. They showed no preference for the field. Was just straight ryegrass over the mixture.
Okay. And Mary?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, it is fair to say a bit more research under intensive dairy systems will be of value to everyone in terms of, the management of these multi-species. Look, essentially, what clover is what's fixed in nitrogen when we talk about multi-species. Other than that, we're generally just talking about plantain and chicory, which do have benefits. But I suppose, look, getting your proportions of clover into your swards and managing your clover, I think it has to be our first step. And that's probably where we will see the biggest benefit in terms of multi-species, if we want to call it that, long term. Chicory suits drier soils. Plantain is pretty more suitable overall to Irish grazing systems. It'll grow at lower temperatures. It'll do better in the spring compared to chicory. It's not as fussy in terms of, it doesn't need soils to be quite as dry. I think we will see them increased, but let's let research go ahead, make the mistakes and give us the advice in terms of what's going to be most suitable longer term. But grass clover, I think we need to put more clover into our swords, and we need to start using it for what it's there for, to fix nitrogen and reduce our dependency on the bagged nitrogen as well.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And just from somebody anonymous there, Mary, going back on the reseeds, how do you go about trying to deal with fruit fly and slugs in your reseed?
So look, the fruit fly can be a problem. I suppose identifying the problem, will help. What we would say is just make sure you have done everything right. If the grass is establishing well, it should be able to outcompete those. To identify you have a problem with the fruit fly, you'll see a bit of discoloration at the base of the seedling, and if you pull the plant, the heart of the plant will essentially come out. If you have a slug issue, easiest way to identify it is maybe go out in the evening and put out fertilizer bags 4 stones in the corner and see the next morning if you have many slugs underneath, and if necessary go out with slug pellets. Rolling will help alleviate both as well, so rolling is crucially important. Perfect.
Now there's some combined questions here I'm going to put together, and it's all in kind of connection with the clover, right? The thing that you mentioned, Mary, about incorporating the clover, having soil, contact and visibility is very important. Kind of the main question kind of coming, would you go after grazing second round or when for clover incorporation? A lot of derogation farmers asking that on the call this evening.
Is this into established or reseeded swards, Sandra? Any idea?
I would say we'll take it with reseeded. They haven't specified.
Yeah, I'd probably look. I mean, it'll depend on your post-emergent spray as well. Some of those post-emergent sprays that aren't going to be clover safe have residual times of 3 months before clover can be incorporated. So make sure you look at the label. You don't want to be sowing your clover and have a residual effect of the spray causing you to waste your money. Okay, so
yeah.
Keep an eye on that. And yeah, look, I mean, you're probably talking, having at least two grazings off it before the clover goes in. The other side of it is you don't want clover going in too late. You want it in by August, or after that, temperatures are going to go against it, and you mightn't get as successful a take as you would like.
Great, thank you. And just seeing, best way to approach a scenario of drought in a new reseed at or in around germination. I suppose
Look, I'd always say sit tight. They tend to come. You know, often we have people maybe going out with slurry tankers and spreading water on them. You have to put a huge amount of water out and especially if you're in dry conditions for it to get down. And the other risk if you're putting out water, but the roots will come to where the water is, so the roots will come up instead of going down, which is where they should be going. And we've often seen where fellas have went out with water afterwards, they get an awful lot of plant pulling for a significant amount of time afterwards because the plant hasn't rooted the way it should. So look, I would say sit tight. We've had, you know, a number of reasonably good droughts, if we want to call it that, over the last couple of years. We've seen very little scenarios where there has been a total failure of a crop, or you might have to oversow if you're unlucky, but sit tight, it'll generally come right. And I suppose management afterwards, once you do get the rain, make sure, you know, if you need to put out P&K fertilizer again, you do, just feed the plant, make sure you're giving it every chance to get established.
Okay, and just I'm going to bring this in as the last question, Mary, to you. If the weather breaks after sowing, how long after sowing is it safe to roll without doing damage to the reseed?
So look, that's going to depend on the conditions at the time. If it's you know, early May, you're probably conditions are ideal. The grass is going to germinate very quickly, and you're probably going to, you know, 10 days after sowing, the grass could have germinated, and you could potentially damage the seedlings at that point. So I would always say beforehand, if you haven't got the roll, you know, at sowing, just do it as soon as you can. But always, if it's, you know, if it's a week afterwards, always go out and walk the field. Just make sure there's no the seeds haven't started to germinate. If they have, you're just going to have to take your chance and sit tight. You don't want to roll a seed that's starting to germinate because you'll do more damage than good.
Perfect, perfect. I hope I've got, I kind of combined some of there was so many questions that have come in there. I've kind of combined some of them together. So I hope everybody got an answer to their question, either through the presentations or may ask them directly. I want to thank Mary and Derek, two great presentations. As we can see from all the questions, plenty of people interested, and I hope they got the same take-home message as I did from both of them. So thank you very much. And I'll just put in a bit of a plug there. I'm on again on Thursday night. The Teagasc dairy team are hosting a webinar with ICBF. You'll see our link up on social media. So please do join. You get to see me a second time in the week. So as I say, the party political broadcast is finished, Mary. Sorry.
Work away. And thanks to you again for hosting, Sandra. And
no problem at all. No problem. I hope everybody listening tonight enjoyed it as much as I did. As I say, thanks again to Mary. Thanks to Derek. And you will be able to listen back to this webinar. It'll be up on the website. And as Mary said, anyone that registered will get a link via their email. So thanks very much. Safe reseeding, and see you all again soon.